Thank you for joining us. This is Business Incorporated here on Channels Television, and we're glad to have you at this time. I'm Chimezi Obi Iwagu. On the show today, Zimbabwe bans banks from processing payments for cryptocurrencies. Volkswagen sees Nigeria automobile sales recovering on economy. Plus, South Africa's Vodacom cuts dividend payout after earnings miss. Let's get the show started now with the markets, and starting from Africa, where the Nigerian All-Share Index and Egypt's EGX 30 index were looking down at midday with a 0.25% and 0.75% drop each. In South Africa, the JSE index was up 0.21%. Kenya closed down 0.85% on Friday. And in the Middle East, the markets were all up at intraday. Looking at the numbers, the Abu Dhabi index was up 0.49%, Dubai up 0.45%, Qatar up 1.33%, outperforming its peers, and Saudi was also up 0.36%. In Europe, stocks were slightly lower in early trade as investors focused on Italian politics, trade relations between the U.S. and China, and a dip in oil prices. European companies are also under pressure after comments from the White House National Security Advisor, John Bolton, that European companies might be hit by U.S. sanctions if the Europeans don't follow Trump's move to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. Let's bring in Daniel Coop, now my colleague in Frankfurt, to tell us more. Hello, Daniel. Good afternoon. A beautiful week to you.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon, and a great week so far. I hope everything is over there fine. We're a little bit suffering here with some unpleasant weather in these days, but the rest is just fine.
But we're doing well here, Daniel. Anyway, Iran officials are meeting European foreign ministers in Brussels, that's on Tuesday, to discuss the ongoing U.S. sanctions on Iran nuclear deal. What would the European officials be looking to secure for the region in area of business and trade interests?
Well, Jimmy, Iran announced over the weekend they will give the European Union a 60-day timeline to decide if they want to stay in the nuclear agreement or not. And if they want to stay in the agreement, what is all of this is going to mean also for trade, because this was the deal. Well, investors were actually not so surprised about this deadline. One trader was telling me a little bit earlier that, of course, now Iran wants something in return, because one thing is very clear: Germany, the European Union, they all want to Iran to stick to their nuclear agreement and, of course, also to their promises. But the question is now if the European partners can also deliver. But this commitment from European partners will be very difficult, probably even impossible to get. On the European Union level, of course, they are saying, well, that European companies, that they should stay inside of Iran, that they should continue doing business with the country, but just very few believe that this is going to be the case. Until sanctions will be in place, many European companies are in a rush right now to get as many deals with Iran done as possible. Airbus, one example, for example, they want to speed up their processes, get more planes earlier to Iran as scheduled. We have to remember that Airbus has signed this mega deal with a volume of more than 100 planes with Iran's national carrier. But once sanctions will be implemented, it is not very likely that too many European companies will stay in the country. Just when you talk here about Germany, for example, the trade volume with Iran is usually around 3 billion euros per year. But when you compare this with the United States, Germany does trade with a volume of more than 100 billion US dollars every year. So, of course, for them, the U.S. business is very important, way more important than the business with Iran, and companies are worried that their very good trade relationship that they have with the United States could at the end suffer. So yeah, very difficult situation. We'll have to see how all of this is going to unfold.
Let's look at the European aviation sector, from Lufthansa to Air France, KLM, and now Brussels Airlines. What exactly are the underlying issues pushing pilots and other workers to strike action in that industry?
Well, first we have to put this in perspective. Brussels Airlines is also a company that belongs to the Lufthansa Group. Carsten Spohr, he is the CEO of Lufthansa, has the ambition together with Eurowings to make Brussels Air also sort of a low-cost carrier as well. The employees of Brussels Air have been a fear for quite some time that they are the ones who could be suffering with all these reforms. But yes, air travelers with Brussels Air are in need of some very strong nerves today, as the Brussels Airline pilots began a 2-day strike on Monday, leading to the cancellation of 75% of flights and affecting 60,000 travelers. The strike will affect 3/4 of the 278 scheduled arriving and departing flights today and 279 flights on Wednesday. The Belgium-based company, which was taken over, I mentioned it, by Lufthansa in late 2016, has asked its airline partners, which also includes Swiss Air and Austrian Airlines, to increase capacity to Brussels to reduce the strike's impact. The company said last week that months of negotiations had failed to produce a deal after the two sides focused more on increased wages, when in fact the pilots were actually more concerned about having a better work-life balance. The airline management is due to discuss the strike later during the day.
Daniel, what is European markets' agenda for this week? Is it the Italian elections and politics, or Trump-China trade talks?
Well, there's a lot on the agenda. First, we have to say also that investors are actually monitoring very closely what's happening right now in Jerusalem and also in Gaza. We are hearing that more than 30 people were killed in those conflicts happening today, with a new U.S. embassy being open in Jerusalem. So that's certainly going to be on the agenda. Also, Iran and trade is going to be a big topic. Then later this week, there's going to be a summit in Washington discussing and talking about all the trade dispute that's happening right now with China. So there's a lot on the agenda. Besides geopolitical topics, big companies also here in Europe are set to open their books. Vodafone, for example, Siemens, Deutsche Telekom, RWE, all opening their books and providing their quarterly numbers. And on Thursday, that's going to be one of the most important days here for investors. Germany's second biggest lender, Commerzbank, will also provide their quarterly numbers. During their last annual shareholder meeting that was taking place last week, they elected the entire new supervisory board. Big promises were made by that time, but investors are expecting and are prepared for losses. This is most likely, like in many cases, also going to affect the share price of the lender again, we have to say, which has been dropping this year already by more than 10%, Jimmy. So busy week here for us at the stock exchange, and we'll be reporting all those latest developments, of course, to you and our audience in Nigeria.
Yeah, I guess we have quite a lot to talk about. So you get ready with that. The week has just started. Enjoy the rest of the day, Daniel.